Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're starting a brand new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto was overpowering Phoenix and build harem with Kurenai Anko and Temari, Part 2. If you enjoy this story, please like the video, subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you want a Part 2. Now, let's begin the fanfic. Kakashi looked up from his book and said, "Yes, it's not like you can do anything to get even with me though." Anko said, "What he call you Gaki?" Naruto said, "Bleach blonde dead last." And Kakashi, "You underestimated me Aegean." Kakashi said, "Why is that?" Naruto said, "I can make that book of yours not be released in Konoha if I wanted." Kurenai said, "Really, how?" The third said, "Naruto, you would do that." Naruto said, "I will if he does that Aegean." Kakashi, thinking it was a bluff, said, "How can you be sure you can do that?" Naruto said, "Like I told the Cage. Over the past few years I have made some investment and I bought a few companies. One such company is the publisher of that book, pervert." Kakashi paled and said, "You're joking, right?" Naruto looked at Anko and smirked before he said, "Anko, my house is not on the ground." The third said, "So what do we do now?" Naruto said, "Proceed as planned for now. When Temari comes for her visits, make sure my team only has D-rank missions so I can talk to her and get to know her and her me. If the council wants to know why you are letting me escort her around town, say that her father requested it. You have no idea why. Also better start planning on announcing my real name when the time comes." The third nodded and Naruto said, "Is that all?" Asuma said, "I think Kurenai has something to say." Only to receive an elbow in the gut. Everyone looked at Kurenai after she hit him and she said, "I do need to say something but later. I need to gather my thoughts." Naruto nodded and said, "CYA tomorrow then Kakashi. Have fun." And disappeared in a swirl of flames. After Naruto was gone, everyone looked at each other and the third said, "So what are you here for anyways?" Kakashi said, "I was coming to tell Naruto when and where to meet tomorrow, but I guess he knows the secret of Kajbunshians." Asuma said, "Kurenai and I have already tested our teams and they passed, so we just came to turn in the paperwork." Anko, who looked like she'd been through hell, said, "I saw Kakashi and he said Gaki was here, so I came to talk to him to see if I could get any more info on where his house is. I believe it is in the western section furthest away from the village because that is where the traps I encountered were." The third said, "What kind of traps?" Anko said, "Anyone who did not know his way around would die if they tried to get through it. I lost 9 summons and triggered nearly 200 traps in a 100-yard range." Asuma whistled and said, "I am glad he's on our side." Kurenai said, "I just hope the village does not do something to get us on his bad side. Imagine the Ethan destruction that he could cause." The third nodded and said, "Okay, let's call it a day. Thanks to our visitor I am behind on paperwork, so I need to get to work." Acting busy as everyone started to leave. When they were gone, he pulled out his Ika Ika Paradise and created 3 Kajbunshians to do the paperwork. As the 4 Junins walked outside the Hokage office, Anko said, "I am hungry, you all want to come and get some dango?" Kurenai said, "Sure." Asuma said, "Why not? Don't have anything else planned." Kakashi said, "Sure. It's not like I need to get up early for anything." Anko nodded and started walking toward her favorite dango stand, Rig Tag. It only took them a few minutes to get to the stand, but the sight that greeted them was not what they expected. There was a sign that said, "Under new management," out front, but when they went inside they saw the old owner standing there working the register like always. Anko said, "Leo, what's up with the sign?" The old owner said, "Oh, that. I have been having money problems for a few years with the cost of shipping supplies in and everything increasing so much that I was afraid I was going to have to close. About a year ago a guy came up and offered to help if he was allowed to be a partner. At first I told him no, but he kept talking and said only thing he wanted to do was bring in a few new items and get new supply lines. I was under contract with my old ones and could not change them until recently, but now the new lines are coming in and so we decided to announce the deal even though he's been my partner for over a year now. Asuma said, so what new items has he brought in? Leo said, well, just mostly a few variations on dango like some fruit and also some drinks. Nothing major because he did not want to change what my customers have liked for years. What surprised me was that he also helped the ramen stand down the road owned by that one guy and his daughter. The only thing he changed about them besides getting new ingredients is he wanted a few drinks that I don't carry. He said he did that to help our economy and also he wanted to repay a debt of kindness. Hey, I am not one to complain. So what would you have? Anko said, I will have the usual. Kurenai looked at the menu and said, give me one of those starfruit dangos and I will also try the flame wine. I have not drunk any of that stuff in almost 5 years as it's next to impossible to get. Kakashi said, I will have a shrimp dango and some sake. Asuma said, I will have the beef dango and some sake also. Leo nodded and said, have a seat and I will bring it out to you shortly. The group did and Asuma said, that was unusual. Anko said, what do you mean? Asuma said, well, usually when someone goes into partnership like that they usually want to change names, change the menu, add their own ideas to the company. All this guy seemed to do was just make it easier to do what he already was doing and add a total of 10 items to the list like they were all his favorites or something. Seems like a lot of work to ensure that his favorite foods are available here if you ask me. A man in the booth behind them with his feet propped up on a chair said, it is but when I am in town since I live alone I like to spoil myself every now and then. All of the Junins were caught off guard as not noticing the man sitting there or even felt him eavesdropping on their conversation. Anko, hating to be caught off guard, said, it's not nice to eavesdrop on a conversation, buddy. The man who was sitting with a glass of wine, a bit of fruit in a bowl and a book in his hand, dressed in a black pair of shorts and a white pullover t-shirt, said, I am sorry for that, Anko. I did not do it on purpose. I just wanted to relax after earlier today and did not feel the need to cook myself. Asuma narrowed his eyes and said, mind if I ask how you know Anko, friend? Just then Leo came over with their food and said, oh Arashi, I see you met some of my best customers. I want to thank you again for allowing me to make those new renovations that are coming. Arashi said, no problem, Leo, like I told you before as part of the deal, you have $400,000 a year to use for whatever you want as long as you make sure the fresh fruit in my wines are in whenever I feel the need to show up and as long as you never turn away a customer because another customer does not like that one. I feel everyone should be treated fairly no matter who they are. As long as they can pay the price on the sign they are all equal no matter if they're a king or a peasant or anything in the middle. Still not looking up from his book. Leo said, of course not. After helping me with so much I would hate to do anything to upset my partner. Arashi said, is your son still planning on going to Rice Country next week? Leo said, yeah. His friend from childhood quit writing almost 4 months ago and he wanted to check on him. Arashi said, Rice is having a sort of problem with missing nins right now. I know that he is stubborn and all, but I hope he will listen to my advice and hire some ninja. I told him I would gladly pay for it. He is a good author and I would hate to see something happen to him. Leo said, I will talk to him, Aegean. I trust your advice since you've been right before. Well, I got customers, enjoy your evening. And walked back to the counter. Arashi sighed as he took a drink from his wine and turned a page in his book and still felt the other ninja keeping an eye on him. He said, relax, Asuma, even a genin knows better than to call out a total stranger's name like I did. Asuma said, then if you know better, why did you do it and who are you to talk to us so casually? Each of the ninja had a weapon in case he was an enemy. Arashi said, It never fails to surprise me when a ninja fails to look underneath the underneath, right Senseiheim? Kurenai stiffened for a moment and blushed and said, so this is your disguise Naru, you as she closed her eyes in pleasure. She was cut off suddenly by Arashi putting his finger to her neck and sending a small amount of chakra to her pleasure nerves. Kurenai slowly opened her eyes and Kakashi said, what was that Arashi? Arashi chuckled and closed his book and said, I am sure you understand why I am using my father's first name, but I just hit a massage point I learned over my lifetime. I figured doing that would have been better than saying don't use that name while I got this disguise on. Asuma said, don't you think you're being paranoid Arashi? Arashi snorted and said, keep an eye on the street for the next few minutes and tell me if I am paranoid or not. Oh, and watch my stuff. That book is getting good and I still like to finish my wine. As he headed outside and around the corner. 2 minutes later Naruto walked by the outside of the dango stand with all 4 ninja watching what was going on. They were surprised by what they saw. Apparently word spread about Naruto being back in town because when he walked down the road a fresh fruit vendor threw a rotten tomato at him and a man spat on the sidewalk in front of him and Naruto said, hi, to a woman and she pulled her kids away saying, not to go near him he's a bad man. About 5 minutes later Arashi walked in and sat down in his seat Aegean and said, the only people I have met that know I am back besides your 4 the old man and Ibiki is Aruka, Mizuki who is in jail, the guy who takes ninja pictures and the kids at the academy. Just from a possible 30 people hearing my name and 27 of them not knowing about me has already spread across the village. I say by the end of the week the council will have a meeting and someone will either try to have me killed or kicked out of the village for being a threat. This village would take Orochimaru and Uchiha Itachi back with open arms and pardons if they had a choice of getting them and get rid of me or keep me and get rid of them. He grabbed his book and finished his glass of wine. He turned and said, enjoy your meals. Don't worry Kakashi. I won't tell the other 2 the hidden reason behind the bell test tomorrow. The upset chicken-headed insignificant hard will probably want to test his strength against me in a fight and the pink harpy will think Sasuke's the best and will save her from anything so I won't really care about showing any real skills during the test but I will try to be a team player. I enjoyed the conversation with you all and hope we can do it Aegean sometimes. It's nice to relax with people you trust. Anko said. Question Gaki. How come you call her Senseiheim but never call me any type of affection? Arashi said, simple Anko. I promised you in my past, I would never call you those until I killed the Hebatem. I keep my promises. Besides, you won't let any guy get truly close to you until you know that thing on your shoulder will never affect you Aegean. That reminds me, after the exams I will remove yours Aegean. CYA, as he started to walk to the door. Anko screamed, wait. Everyone in the restaurant looked at her. Luckily the owner, Arashi, and the 3 other Junins were all that was in there. Naruto turned and walked back over and said, yes. Anko said, you can remove it. Naruto said, level 1 I can but only if the host truly wants it. For you I can but with his POW. Every one of the Junins who were looking at him a moment ago listening now heard a low growl and saw his eyes flash red for a moment freaking them for a moment. They looked at him and saw his eyes narrow and looked out on the street to see what he was upset about. They saw a black-haired boy talking with a gray-haired boy with glasses. Kurenai said, what's wrong? Naruto watched the boys outside in silence a few moments and saw the black-haired boy hand the gray-haired one a folder. Naruto whispered, mother traitor. Kakashi nodded to the others and put his hands on Naruto's shoulder and they all left Shushine to the Hokage's office. When they got there Kakashi saw only the Hokage there and said, Naruto, what was that about? The third saw them arrived and after hearing Kakashi call the man Naruto figured it was a henge and listened as Naruto said, I knew there was a connection but never could prove it. That is how he got all our info. The third said, what Naruto? Naruto walked over and powered a Rasengan and destroying a target dummy in the corner, surprising the others by both the Rasengan and the speed and display he made, and said, "That gray-haired boy was Kabuto, Orochimaru's right-hand man and spy. He is stronger and more dangerous than you, Kakashi, so don't underestimate him when the time comes. He can regenerate from near death, so make sure you destroy his body." The other boy you all saw was Sai, with venom in his voice. Naruto closed his eyes because he is feeling his rage building. Asuma said, "What's so special about that Sai kid?" Naruto said, "He is a member of Root and Danzo's son." Silence filled the room at that. Naruto said, "I knew there was a connection there but never could find it. I need to calm down before I go out and kill them both," walking over and sitting on the window sill. The third said, "What happened?" Asuma said, "We ran into Naruto in his disguise he has on at the Dango shop. Naruto was just explaining how he was going to remove Anko's curse seal when he saw those two men. We saw his eyes change color and became concerned when he ignored us, and we saw the two men talk and one pass a package to the other. We brought him here to find out what that was all about and to calm him down." Naruto sighed and said, "I want to thank you all. Even with all my experience, I still act on impulse sometimes. I was not expecting to see that. I guess you, Kakashi, will be the only teammate I have that won't betray me." Kakashi said, "What do you mean, Naruto?" Naruto said, "Sasuke will try to kill me when he defects. After Sasuke defects, me and Sakura get specialized training. Me under Jiraiya and Sakura under Tsunade. The lifetimes that those events happen, we get a special mission to retrieve Sasuke. You are unable to because of injuries, so Yamato replaces you as our sensei and Sai replaces Sasuke. Now I find out Sai is working with Orochimaru pisses me off. As for what I mean by Sakura, if I show any skill Sasuke wants, he will promise her a date if he can't get me or you to tell him and use her as his personal spy to look around my home or try and get me to tell. Sorry, I learned from my mistakes." Kurenai said, "Are you sure you're not jumping to conclusions, Naruto, about this Sai guy?" Naruto said, "Old man, you know Sai, right?" The third said, "I have met him before, yes, why?" Naruto said, "What was his personality like?" The third said, "I don't understand." Naruto sighed still in his Arashi henge and said, "Danzo groomed Sai since the day he could remember to be his personal servant. He forced Sai to become socially isolated. He has no emotions at all. He won't talk to anyone because he does not know how to. All he knows is how to kill and do whatever Danzo tells him. If he says to kill yourself with a smile on and cry at the same time, he will. He does not know how to think for himself. Do you see what I am trying to say? There is no way he would be on the street talking with someone unless Danzo told him to. He can't even leave Root headquarters without Danzo, okay?" The third sighed and said, "That is what I was afraid of when he wanted you to be a secret weapon for the village all those years ago." Just then the door opened up and the secretary said, "Sorry to bother you, Hokage-sama, but Hyuga Hiyashi is here to see you." The third said, "Send him in." But notice Naruto had disappeared, but the others were still there and the training dummy was back in place, Aegean undamaged. Hiyashi walked in and the third said, "To what do I owe the pleasure, Hiyashi?" Hiyashi looked at the four in the room and said, "This is concerning something I heard today and might be discussed in private." The third said, "I believe I already know why you are here, Hiyashi, but go ahead. I need to finish talking with them after this anyways, so go ahead." Hiyashi said, "Very well. I have received reports that Naruto Uzumaki is back." The third said, "Yes, what of it?" Hiyashi said, "I also heard he is now a ninja of this village. Am I correct?" The third said, "Yes. Why are you here, Hiyashi? Surely you are not just here to learn if a few rumors are true." Hiyashi said, "Certainly not. I was notified by several other council members and they want to know why that child has returned and why he was allowed to be a ninja. They are also demanding to know where the child has been for these years. I came here to ascertain the truth of this. The third said, and what do you plan to do, Hiyash? Hiyash said, that demon is too dangerous to allow back in this village. If he is not removed from this village, the council will have no choice but to remove you and have a new Hokage named. Naruto dropped the disguise in the corner and said, actually Hiyash, the council would be overstepping its boundaries if it tried to remove me. Hiyash was surprised that he had not sensed the boy in the corner but hid it and said, why is that boy? Naruto said, oh, it's boy now. At least you're smart enough not to break the third's law while I am officially here in the office. Very well, I will tell you why the council can't. The laws of this village are on my side this time. Hyuga-san. Hiyash said, you will do well to show respect to your superiors. Naruto said, I did, seeing as I am a clan head myself and also a council member. This got everyone's attention, not knowing what he meant. Hiyash smirked and said, really now, boy? What makes you think you have either of those rights? Naruto smirked himself and said, allow me to show you. And he walked to the picture of the Yondaime and cut his finger and put the blood on the picture, and it morphed into an open safe. Hiyash was surprised along with everyone else, and Naruto reached in and pulled out a scroll and said, this is the proof I need, Hiyash, and tossed him a scroll. Hiyash opened it and paled at what he read. Hiyash said, there must be a mistake. Naruto said, nope. The blood seal on the safe is proof, and if my grandmother comes to the village, then all it would take is a simple blood test. The third said, what exactly does it say, Hiyash? Naruto said, go ahead, I don't mind. I have my copy of that anyways, so if someone were to destroy it, I still have proof. Hiyash handed the scroll to the third and after thinking for a moment said, that proves you're a clan head. That does not make you a council member though. Naruto said, actually, you're right. I actually have 4 council seats. Hiyash narrowed his eyes and said, what do you mean? Naruto said, I have my father's seat. Based on the laws of Konoha's charter state that all Kage's living or deceased closest living relative is automatically given a seat on the council forever. Second, I have my family seat since my family was one of the original clans of Konoha like yours, so that is my second seat. My third seat is mine because of my grandfather's family and because he is not here in the village and I am the only blood relation of his family in the village, I have his seat. The third said, I know Tsunade is your grandmother, but who is your grandfather? Hiyash said, yes, I would also like to know that. Naruto said, Kakashi is reading his book right now. Everyone turned and saw a copy of Ika Ika Paradise fall to the ground. Kakashi said, you hate me, don't you? Naruto smirked and said, yeep. Not only do I own the publishing company for those books, but my grandfather writes them. Now Hiyash, before you have a heart attack, I think you should know one more thing before the council tries to get rid of me. Hiyash said, that is. Naruto said, do you know why I am able to not be insane after what this village has done to me because of the Kyuubi? Hiyash did not answer and Naruto said, my bloodline. I have the bloodline to control demons just like the first Hokage. Now here is something the council better learn quickly, as it seems to forget the laws of our village charter. The third said, what do you mean, Naruto? Even I am not sure what you're talking about now. Naruto said, as stated by the charter of this village. Any founding family member of Konoha that is from a founding clan has not only free travel to come and leave as they please, but also any structures or resources built on the lands that were divided among the original clans are always owned by those clans and cannot be taken away, given or sold by anyone. They will remain owners of those lands and any buildings or resources of those lands for as long as the village of Konoha stands and cannot be taken by the council, future Hokage, or any other person or persons of power. Hiyash said, what exactly are you getting at? Naruto said, Hokage-sama, can you bring out the map of the current village of Konoha while I grab something out of the safe? The Hokage nodded and grabbed the map, and Naruto walked back with an old scroll and opened it and said, notice anything? As the scroll showed a map of the original Konoha. Asuma looked on and said, "My God." As everyone looked. Hiyashi said, "That can't be right." Naruto said, "When I first saw it myself, I checked with the map in the archives and they are identical. My family owns everything from the Hokage monument to the current south walls of the village. The Hyuga and Uchiha own everything from the academy to their compound. The third's clan owns what they still own, as do the other clans. The reason my clan lands are like this is because we were the first to allow others besides clans to move in and gave them homesteader rights. Even thought the village has prospered and everything, the law is the law. My family is seeing as Tsunade and myself are the last two of our clan own the entire village of Konoha from the boundary of the academy to the south wall north to the Hokage monument, which means that every building including the Hokage tower, hospital, stores, restaurants and homes are mine. The council cannot get rid of me. Oh, and just one more thing, Hiyashi. Look at my body with your bloodline." Hiyashi did and was surprised and seeing as his coils were larger than anyone he had ever seen and it was all blue chakra except a small amount of red and said, "How?" Naruto said, "I have almost absorbed all of Kyuubi's power as my own. As far as the council should care, by the time I am 16 it will be dead if not sooner. I am sure you don't want to call me demon again, do you, Hyuga? Especially with the power you can see is at my disposal to either defend this villages as I plan to like my family has, or if the village wishes to make me an enemy." Hiyashi said, "I have a lot to consider. Trying to figure the best way to use this to his advantage. If what Naruto said is true, then he has Konoha by the balls." Naruto sighed and said, "Hiyashi, I may not like you and you may not like me, but I have a proposition for you I think you might actually like." Hiyashi said, "What's that?" Naruto said, "How would you like to be rid of the cage seal on your family forever while still able to secure your bloodline?" This got everyone's attention and Hiyashi said, "What do you mean?" Naruto said, "Nobody knows my true skills because I left the village to train. During that time I have become a sealmaster of sorts. In fact, my skills helped me speed up the process to kill Kyuubi. After I become Chunin, I plan to go for my Junin status right after and my sealmaster certifications. I have designed a seal after I heard the detail of what happened with Cloud and your brother." Hiyashi narrowed his eyes and Naruto said, "I know the entire truth, Hiyashi, and Neji and Hinata both. I feel lost on that deal. It's for them that I made a seal that would still seal the bloodline at death but would make it where you could put it on everyone and not on their foreheads but over their hearts. If you would like, I can have Hinata bring them by sometime this coming week and let you have your own experts look at them. I also can remove the cage seal if you want. The only real difference is the seal won't be able to torture a branch member like your current seal does. But if everyone has one, then you don't need a branch family, but that's your clan. I just thought I would try and make peace with your clan and mine. I plan to restore my clan and I don't want my children to have to deal with any animosity if I can help it." Hiyashi said, "Before I decide on anything, I would like to know how you know about the incident and what exactly you know." Naruto said, "While I was traveling, I met a missing nin from Cloud. He told me about how he was supposed to meet the man you killed and help bring Hinata back. He did not know I was from here at the time because I was hanged into a missing mist nin. He told me about how they discovered the switch but was too late to object and how he was supposed to be killed because of his failure. I killed him and turned him in for the bounty Cloud had on him. Anyways, after that I went to Cloud and turned in a bounty on the man, and while I was there I broke into the record office and found out more info. Apparently they found out your brother took your place to save your life. I also found out that they had help from a Hyuga named Hiri in getting the details of your family home." Hiyashi narrowed his eyes and said, "Do you have any proof of this?" Naruto said, "All I got is the mission scroll the Cloud nin I killed had on him. He was supposed to destroy it but used it as a bargaining chip to keep Cloud from sending hunters after him. It detailed when and where to meet Hiri and what he was supposed to deliver for the info. Everyone in the room was stunned at this, and Hiyash dropped his emotionless mask and said, "If you do have that, I will make you a deal." Naruto said, "Give me about 5 minutes and I will be back," and flamed Shushin away. Hiyash looked at the third and said, "Did you know this?" The third said, "No. Only thing I know for sure is Naruto found out who his family is and then said he was leaving to train. He is back now, but almost everything from the time he left to when he got back I know nothing about. I will tell you this. What he has told me is true." Just then a flame Shushin appeared and Naruto had a scroll and looked at Kakashi and said, "Sharingan can't copy it. I mix my wind affinity with the demon Charka to cause the effect." He then walked over to Hiyash and handed the scroll and said, "Here you are." Hiyash opened it and began to read it and said, "I can't believe he would do that." Naruto said, "I believe it. From what I can tell, he is one of your council members in your clan. His father was going to be named clan head, but yours was instead, and I guess he has a grudge. Am I right about him being on your council?" Hiyash nodded and said, "Yes." Naruto said, "Well, what is this deal you spoke of?" Hiyash said, "I will support your position as the current clan head and backing on the council. I will also agree to help with anything you need to restore your clan if I am able to." Naruto said, "Money is not an issue, and I want to state this now, Hiyash. I am not interested in an arranged marriage with your daughters. It's not that I don't like them or anything. It just I want my marriages to any woman to be love. I have an arrangement in the works, but I have already told all party involved that it has to be love and not responsibility. I will still have Hinata deliver the seal to you sometime in the next week. I do have a small request. I know that Neji is your nephew and his hate for the main house is clouding his judgment. Could you reveal the truth before the Chunin exams? I fear if he and Hinata somehow met, he might use that forum to avenge his father." Hiyash said, "I will do as you asked. I do request that when your future weddings are I am invited, though I do have one question. Do you know who your mother is?" Naruto said, "For now, no. I am hoping to meet and convince Tsunade to return to Konoha, and if she does, I will try to talk her into doing a blood test on all records in Konoha archives to see if she can tell me who it is, since she does not know about me yet." Hiyash said, "What do you mean?" Naruto said, "When Tsunade had my father, the village was at war. She hid him in the orphanage to protect him from her enemies. My father did not know about her being his mother until he became Hokage and performed the same request I am going to ask of Tsunade. Since until I returned from my training trip, the only person who knew I was Arashi's son was the third. I am using it to my advantage to get everything set up for my clan's return to Konoha. However, I do still have laws to protect me should the council try anything to stop me or my clan." Hiyash said, "If I may ask, how do you know the laws of this village so well?" Naruto said, "I have an almost photographic memory and can read the entire Konoha library in one day with a just you I know. I used that jutsu with permission from one of the Fire Lords who had copies of all laws of Konoha and its charters." Hiyash said, "I see." Naruto said, "Well, Hiyash, it is getting late and I know you have a lot to think about, but I would like for you to keep what you heard here a secret until I make it public. I don't want to cause a riot, seeing as I am considered a demon of the village instead of the hero my father wanted. Have a good evening, everyone." And flamed Shushin away. Hiyash turned and saw the third looking at him, and the third said, "Now, Hiyash, I would like to remind you about my law. Don't let me catch you calling him a demon Aegean or I will take actions." Hiyash nodded and said, "Kazama-san said he had an arrangement in the works. Might I inquire as to what it is?" The third said, "I am not at liberty to say at this time. I can tell you it will either be finalized or cancelled by the time the finals of the Chunin exams." Hiyash nodded and said, "We really messed up, didn't we?" The third said, "I may not know his exact skills, Hiyash, but I can tell you this. He is stronger than his father." Hiyash paled and said, "I see. Perhaps I should do everything I can to help him and his clan. If what he said is true, his clan would be a welcome addition to any village. Kakashi said, "What do you mean?" Hiyashi said, "I know what he was referring to when he said he still had other laws that protect his clan. As clan head, he has the right to call for a vote of all current members in the village. He has the right to remove his clan and seize all of his clan's holdings and move them should 3/4 of the clan in the village agrees. Since he is the only clan member in the village, he can take his clan to any village he chooses." The third paled and said, "I hope you will do what you promised Hiyashi. If he becomes upset without village, he can destroy it without lifting a finger." Hiyashi nodded and left. The Junins looked at each other and Anko said, "Gaki was right, Aegean." The third said, "What?" Kurenai said, "Earlier when we told him he was being paranoid hanging in public, he showed us he was not by walking down the street as himself and saw the villagers being cruel. He also said the council would try to get rid of him by the end of the week. Looks like that started also." Kakashi said, "Why do I keep feeling like I am the child when he is in the room?" The third said, "Because ever since I met him at the age of 5 and he told me the truth, I felt the same way." Asuma said, "I want to know how he did that to you at the restaurant." Kurenai blushed and said, "None of your business. I need to go." And she left in a swirl of leaves. Kakashi said, "You really enjoying this, aren't you?" Asuma said, "Yeep. I think she could use someone in her life." Kakashi said, "I thought you both had a thing going." Asuma said, "Well, we just hang out mostly. Hell, the last 2 times we tried dating we never even kissed." Kakashi nodded and said, "You have anything you want me to work on, Hokage-sama?" The third said, "Try to evaluate him if you can, Kakashi." Kakashi nodded and left in a swirl of leaves. Anko started walking toward the door but stopped and said, "I know the Gaki has a reason for not doing it now, but do me a favor and find out why he won't remove it now for me." The third said, "I will, but it will be hard." Anko nodded and melted into the floor. Asuma looked at the third and said, "So what's really going on, Dad?" The third said, "Honestly, I don't know. The more I think I understand, the less I actually do." Asuma said, "Do you really trust him?" The third sighed and said, "Truthfully, no. It's all too convenient. If what he says is true, then I have no choice but to trust him, but it's all a little hard to believe. I am going to get a hold of my former students and find out if what he said is true. If it is, then I have more proof than his word." Asuma said, "I should let you know that he is buying into a few business in town. Either he is truly saying the truth or he is setting something up." The third nodded and said, "For now I want you to train your team normally. I may change everyone's training if I find out later that he is telling the truth. I hope my lack of faith does not come back to bite me or this village in the ass." Asuma nodded and left. Neither the third nor Asuma detected the small plant fade into the ground in the corner of the office. In Naruto's house, he slowly opened his eyes and said, "I hope so, to old man. I hope so too. Looks like I will have to do things myself for a while. Perhaps someday someone will actually trust me once they know who I am." And he put his book back into the shelf of his library and walking upstairs to his bedroom. There comes a point in everyone's life where they have only one thought in their mind. That thought is, "I wonder how I can piss the world off today." That thought went through Naruto's mind when he started getting ready for the day. He looked to his weapons, scrolls and other items he would need for the day. He looked at his cloths in the closet and smirked as he decided what to do today. Sakura was in a dream world today. First, she got up an hour earlier than she normally would because today she was going to take a test with her Sasuke-kun. She got her best dress and put on her makeup, got all the little journals she kept on Sasuke and the new journal she bought yesterday to write everything her and Sasuke did now that they are on the same team. She thought about her other teammate and said, "What a jerk," remembering how he described himself. It was one line. "My name is Naruto." That made everyone there sweat drop. Sakura looked at the clock and said, "I am going to be late." Funny thing is she is 2 hours earlier than she is supposed to be. Sasuke was in his shower getting ready for the day. His thoughts were today I will be one step closer to killing him. After getting out of the shower he put on his clothes that he had laid on his bed and quickly left to meet his team. He stopped for a moment feeling something was wrong but could not figure it out. Oh well, it will only get in my way to kill him. On his way to the training ground when he would pass someone who was a ninja they would snicker at him but his pride would not let him ask why. Sasuke and Sakura arrived within 5 minutes of each other but Sasuke ignored her and she was busy writing something in journal. 2 hours after they were supposed to meet for their team meeting both Kakashi and Naruto had not shown up. Suddenly the sound of music echoed across the village of Konoha waking everyone who was not up yet and making everyone cover their ears. Now some of you might be wondering where the music was coming from. That is actually kind of funny. When people started to exit their houses to see where the music was coming from they saw something that no one in the history of the village had ever seen. A certain red-eye woman looked at the source and started to laugh harem. Everyone looked up at the Hokage monument and saw the 4 faces of the Hokage singing with the words to the song and showing actual expressions. Of course it was a genjutsu but that was besides the point. Her laughter grew even more to the point she started to cry when a figure was seen walking down the middle of the street. Said figure was 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighed about 160 pounds. He had blonde hair and blue eyes. He was currently dancing to the music that was playing. Now that would be funny but was not the reason said red-eye woman was laughing. No, the reason was how he was dressed or not dressed would be a better word for it. The only cloths he had on was a pair of boxers that had the word on the front and a picture of 2 hands on the back and a pimp hat with a cane. Once the figure got closer and the red-eye woman could see his muscles and how ripped he was he said, "Morning Senseiheim," as he continued to dance through town on his way to the training ground. Now the song he was dancing to and the Hokages were singing went a little like this. I'm 2 for my love, 2 for my love. Love's going to leave me. I'm 2 for my shirt, 2 for my shirt. So it hurts. And I'm 2 for Konoha, 2 for Konoha. Suna and Iwa. And I'm 2 for your party. 2 for your party. No way I'm disco dancing. I'm a model, you know what I mean. And I do my little turn on the catwalk. Yeah, on the catwalk, yeah. I do my little turn on the catwalk. I'm 2 for my bar, 2 for my bar. 2 by far. And I'm 2 for my hat. 2 for my hat, what do you think about that? I'm a model, you know what I mean. And I do my little turn on the catwalk. Yeah, on the catwalk, yeah. I shake my little touche on the catwalk. I'm 2 for my 2 for my 2 for my. 'Cause I'm a model, you know what I mean. And I do my little turn on the catwalk. Yeah, on the catwalk, yeah. I shake my little touche on the catwalk. I'm 2 for my cat, 2 for my cat. Poor cat. I'm 2 for my love, 2 for my love. Love's going to leave me. And I'm 2 for this song. Kakashi, who along with anyone else who was asleep decided to give it up as the music still played and got ready for the day. When he got to the training ground the song was just about to end and he looked at his team but sweat dropped as 2 of his students were gaping looking behind Kakashi. He turned and sweat dropped as his 3rd student was currently standing on top of water still dancing with the music. As the final line of HTE's song hit Naruto took off his pimp hat and threw it and his cane in the air just at the last word they went up in a puff of smoke and suddenly everyone's attention was diverted to Sasuke as he was consumed in a puff of smoke. When the smoke cleared the shirt Sasuke had on now had changed. His traditional blue Uchiha shirt was now a sleeveless t-shirt that said, I am an upset, chicken-headed, insignificant, hard. Kakashi sweat dropped and Sakura fainted from the mental trauma. Sasuke was fuming on the inside and Naruto looked like nothing was wrong. After reviving Sakura, Kakashi said, now that everyone is awakened, looks at Naruto who is still dressed only in his boxers, ready, I guess I will now explain the test. He pulls out 2 bells. Kakashi said, now, You have 3 hours to get these bells from me, and the one who does not has to go back to the academy. Come at me with the intent to kill. Begin. Sasuke and Sakura disappeared into the surrounding area, and Naruto just leaned against a tree and pulled out an Enpa don't own any right and scrolled down the list of song. Kakashi's sweat dropped and said, compared to the others you're weird. Naruto smirked and stood up stretching and said, this one's for you Kakashi, and hit play. Naruto got into a stance Kakashi recognized as the Iron Fist style guy used and said, oh shit, as the music started playing across the entire village Aegean as the Hokage sang. Suddenly Naruto smirked and Kakashi pulled up his Hi-8 showing his Sharingan causing Sasuke to gasp. Then they both blurred out of existence. Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those cats were fast as lightning. In fact it was a little bit frightening. But they fought with expert timing. They were funky China men from funky Chinatown. They were chopping them up and they were chopping them down. It's an ancient Chinese art and everybody knew their part. From a feint into a slip, and kicking from the hip. Naruto appeared within leg sweep that Kakashi jump and then Naruto jumped to match his jump and they started trading punches. Then blurred out of sight Aegean. Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those cats were fast as lightning. In fact it was a little bit frightening. But they fought with expert timing. There was Funky Billy Chin and Little Sammy Chung. He said here comes the big boss, let's get it on. We took a bow and made a stand, started swinging with the hand. The sudden motion made me skip, now we're into a brand new trip. Then they both appeared panting a little. Naruto changed stances to one Kakashi did not know and then charged Kakashi slow but at the last second speeded up incredibly and kicked Kakashi once of the ground, then he received a punch into the gut, sending him double over only to receive 2 more punches being lifted at least a foot higher each time. And then a kick to the side of the head and they both blurred out of existence. Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those cats were fast as lightning. In fact it was a little bit frightening. But they did it with expert timing. Repeat, make sure you have expert timing. Kung fu fighting, had to be fast as lightning. Finally as the song ends Kakashi and Naruto both appear and Naruto turns to see Sasuke and Sakura standing there gaping and said, look in you pockets. Both seemed confused and reached into their pockets and found the bells. Naruto said, same time tomorrow Kakashi. Kakashi just nodded and pulled his Hi-8 down before collapsing on the ground. Sasuke is at a loss for words and Naruto goes through his songs and starts walking away and Sasuke said, fight me. Naruto smirked and hit play and said, fine, and got into another fighting stance and the music started playing. As they got into a fighting stance the music said, fight for you right, fight for you life, Mortal Kombat. And both Naruto and Sasuke charged and in one punch Sasuke was on the ground and Naruto said, flawless victory, and walked over picking Kakashi up and flame Shushin to the hospital. Sakura went over to Sasuke crying but then a female voice said, kiss him. Sakura looked around because it's not her inner self but did not see anyone. She said, who's there? The sweet voice said, I am you Gordian Angel. I gave Naruto the ability to beat Sasuke so you can have your way with him while he is asleep. Now kiss him. Sakura said, no. The voice said, fine. I guess I will go and be Ino's Gordian instead and help her get Sasuke. Sakura screamed, wait. I will do it. The voice said, good. Do it. And Sakura slowly bent down and kissed the Uchiha. The voice said, now as payment for this you must be friends with Naruto and not hate him for hitting Sasuke or you will never be able to do this or anything else Aegean. Understand? Sakura stuttered, yes. The voice said, good. I will keep watch and if you disobey me I will know. Remember. Practice every chance you can when Sasuke is out so when you finally kisses you awake you will know it's true love. Also never be mean to your other teammate. He will save your life once. Sakura nodded and said, anything else? She only heard silence. At the hospital, a Sertian blonde was chuckling to himself as he walked out the hospital getting the info from his cage bun Shin Naruto, his no jutsu self. Once he made it outside, he looked through the songs on his NPOD one more time, finding the song he was looking for. He jumped up on the roofs and makes his way to the Hokage monument and hits play, listening to the song as he stands looking over the village, and the music starts to play. I'm so high, I can hear heaven. I'm so high, I can hear heaven. Oh, but heaven, no, heaven don't hear me. And they say that a hero could save us. I'm not gonna stand here and wait. I'll hold on to the wings of the eagles. Watch as we all fly away. Someone told me that love would all save us. But how can that be? Look what love gave us. A world full of killing, and blood spilling. That world never came, and they say that a hero could save us. I'm not gonna stand here and wait. I'll hold on to the wings of the eagles. Watch as we all fly away. Hi igh. Now that the world isn't ending. It's love that I'm sending to you. It isn't the love of a hero. And that's why I fear it won't do. And they say that a hero could save us. I'm not gonna stand here and wait. I'll hold to the wings of the eagles. Watch as we all fly away. And they're watching us. Watching us. They're watching us. Watching us. As we all fly away. And they're watching us. Watching us. They're watching us. Watching us. As we all fly away. Yeah. And they're watching us. Watching us. They're watching us. Watching us. As we all fly away. Yeah. Whoa. As the music ended, Naruto had his eyes closed and said, "Watch me, Dad and Kyuubi. I will protect this village and everyone in it." And he let the wind blow over him and silently stood there enjoying the peace. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end, and Abnu landed behind him and said, "The council wishes to see you." Demon. Naruto nodded and flamed Shushin away, scarring the Abnu. When Naruto arrived, he was greeted by the Hokage and his two main advisors as well as the entire council. Naruto was still in just his boxers, making most of the council furious. Naruto looked at them and smirked and sighed. "So what does the illustrious council of Konoha wish to see me for?" "I was enjoying my time on my lands this morning." Danzo said. "Shut up, boy. We are here to discuss your disturbing the village this morning and your punishment." Naruto dropped all restrictions he had on his power and flashed his Ki, which combined with the backlash was enough to scare the entire council. Naruto said, channeling his demonic chakra into his voice, "Before any of you pissants try anything this morning, you will listen to me. I am not the same Naruto Uzumaki you all pushed around as a child. In fact, my name is not even Uzumaki. It's Kazama, just like my father Arashi Kazama the Yondaime. Second, the effects of that genjutsu were felt only on lands I own based on the laws of Konoha. Third, I am also the grandson of Tsunade, who is the granddaughter of the first Hokage and the grandniece of the second Hokage. Seeing as she is not in this village right now, I am the current clan head of both her family and the Kazama family that adopted my father when he was placed in an orphanage for his protection. Based on that fact, I also have multiple council seats in this council. If you would look at the charter of this village, you would discover I also own everything from the South Gate to the Academy to the Hokage Monument as it was written in the village charter. Now that I really pissed you off, I have one last thing before I release you all. You know why I was chosen to stop the Ninetales. It's not just because my father could not ask another family to give their child. No, it's because I was the only one who could contain it. Why, you ask? This. And Naruto slammed his hand against the ground, causing a tree to burst through the council chamber floor and right through the roof of the building. Naruto then released the key and put his power restrictors back on and smirked, seeing the scarred look on everyone's face. Naruto said, "So what do you want to see me about?" "Well, I will let you all think about what I said. Have fun, pissants." And he flamed Shushin away. Now those who knew of Naruto being from the future were surprised when he took this course of action. Not only had he told the council basically to kiss his His power spike was enough that it scarred the shit out of everyone in the entire village, being so massive. Naruto was still pissed off after he went to walking through the streets of Konoha. Everyone seemed to be giving him wide berth of walkway. Naruto saw a figure walking toward him pissed and said, "Gaki, what the hell was that about? Not only do you piss off the entire village, but you get into a pissing contest with the council, scaring the shit out of everyone in the village." Naruto ignored her and kept walking. She looked at him and said, "What? No answer. Too good to talk to a friend. Here I thought you wanted to be special." Naruto stopped in his tracks and said, "Trust Anko." Anko stopped and looked confused and said, "What?" Naruto said, "I said trust. Do you know how hard it is to live a life where the people you want to be close to don't trust you? It's not bad enough my father had to curse me, but even after I tell the truth to those I trust and I expect the same thing from them, but I no matter what I am never trusted." Anko looked at him and said, "You are an idiot. Of course no one is going to trust you. You're a ninja. We make our living out of deception, idiot. You know, for someone who lived as much as you say you have, you can be naive." Naruto looked at the sky and said, "You know the last thing Kyuubi told me before he died, Anko?" Anko said, "What, Gaki?" Naruto said, "He told me that I should never deny who I am. To do that would be betraying myself. You know what the sad thing is? I never had a chance to know who I am. I have always been what everyone already thinks I am. A monster, a demon, an idiot, a weakling, a dead last and a failure. I have had to fight for every ounce of respect I ever had. Do you have any idea what it's like to wait for the people you trust to stab you in the back?" Anko stood there quietly and said, "Yeah, kid, I do. But I also know something you seem to have forgot. Respect is earned, not given." Naruto looked at her and sighed, closing his eyes, and said, "I am tired, Anko. Truth is, I don't know what I truly want to accomplish." Anko looked at him and said, "What makes you happy?" Naruto was quiet for a moment and said, "Having someone talk to me as an equal without looking at me with hate. Enjoying a meal with someone and not worry if I have been poisoned. To have the one thing I never actually had. A family. That is what would make me happy. The feeling of not being alone anymore." Anko said, "So why do you try so hard to show everyone how much of a badass you are and give them one more reason to hate you and stay away from you?" Naruto looked at her for a moment and said, "You're right. I already blew this one and probably will get the Leaf Village destroyed because of my damn pride and arrogance." Anko said, "You're going to start over again, aren't you?" Naruto nodded and said, "Thank you." Anko said, "What?" Naruto said, "I know what I need to do now, and blowing my stack at the council did help clear my head. I have dealt with those enough and learned enough laws to really piss them off. I have wanted to do that so much it felt good. I do have one thing I have always wanted to do." Anko said, "What's that?" Naruto said, "You like torture, right?" Anko nodded her head slowly and Naruto said, "There is a certain guy the first want to have a little fun with before I start over again." Anko said, "What are you planning, Gaki?" Naruto said, "How would you like a little revenge on Orochimaru?" Anko grinned and said, "I like you style, Gaki. What do you have planned?" Naruto said, "Meet me at the tower in the Forest of Death in 2 hours." Anko nodded and Naruto disappeared in a swirl of flames. 2 hours later, when Anko arrived at the tower in the Forest of Death, the sight that greeted her was not what she expected. The main battle arena had 2 trees growing out of the floor, and she saw a gray-haired kid with glasses being held to both trees by vines. Anko walked into the room and said, "What the hell?" Naruto walked over and threw a glass he was drinking against a wall, shattering it, and said, "Meet Kabuto, Orochimaru's right-hand man." Kabuto said, "I don't know what he is talking about. I have never met Orochimaru before. I was on my way to the hospital to work and he appeared out of nowhere and brought me here. Help." Naruto said, "Anko, he says he never met Orochimaru before, but check his neck." Kabuto paled as Anko walked over and saw a cursed seal and she said, "Never met him, huh? Okay, Gaki. You got my interest. What do you plan to do?" Naruto said, "Well, Kabuto here has a healing ability almost as good as mine. I was thinking we could play a little game. First one to leave a permanent scar on him wins the right to move on to the next form of torture." Anko smirked and said, "I like you style, Gaki," and pulled out a kunai. Naruto smirked and also pulled out a kunai. The next 6 hours screams could be heard coming from the forest of death, but since everyone avoided it, no one heard them. After it was over and Anko said, "I can't believe you did that." Naruto smirked and said, "Me, I just carved our names into his back." "You removed his manhood." Anko said, "Well, we did learn that was the one thing he could not grow back." Naruto nodded and said, "I know what you mean. You pulled out his nails. I broke his knuckles. You removed them. I shattered his arms. You filled his muscles with venom. I broke his ankles. You removed teeth." Anko said, "At least I like the way you finished him off. 100 exploding tags wrapped around a kunai that you used the 1000 years of death with." Naruto smiled and said, "At least we found out a little info about Orochimaru I can use." Anko sighed and said, "So when are you going back to start over Aegean Gaki?" Naruto's smile faded and said, "Soon. I already used the only poison that can kill me and put it in my body before we started. I did not want to ask anyone to kill me to go back. It should finish me soon." Anko nodded and said, "So what do you plan to do when you go back?" Naruto said, "I think I will work behind the scenes Aegean. Secretly get strong again. I don't know if I will do the disappearing act Aegean though. Even though I traveled some, it was lonely." Anko said, "So what about your clan?" Naruto said, "I only know 3 women I would like to have in my life. Senseiheim, Temari-chan and you, but I don't know how to get all 3 of you and do what needs to be done. I don't want to live without all 3 of you though. You each have a quality that is unique to you that makes my life more complete." Anko said, "You seem to know how to get Kurenai and that Temari girl. I think the only one who you don't really know how to get is me, huh?" Naruto nodded and said, "Temari is an easy one to get. All I have to do is either arrange a marriage with her father or help Gaara, but I hate going through the old man to do it. Once I actually meet her, it is easy to get her to like me because I don't use her to get to her father or as a plaything. I see her as a person and let her know. Kurenai is harder to get because guys are always trying to seduce her for her looks, but if I show her how special she is to me, I can do it. Also, the fact I am interested in the real her helps. You, the only thing I really have to impress you is my drive to kill the Hebatem. I know you have a mask up to keep people from getting close, and even with my lifetimes I never could get really close to share the pain I see in myself also." Anko nodded and sat a moment and said, "When you go back, there is 3 things you could do to impress me." Naruto looked at her surprised and she said, "First, send me some white roses. They're my favorite, but don't tell who they are from. The second thing will be harder for you to do, but I have faith in you. When Orochimaru took me as an apprentice, I had a locket with a picture of my parents and me. He took it and threw it into the chasm by the hot springs on the west side of town. I figure with your bloodline you might be able to get down there and return it to me." Naruto nodded and said, "What's the third thing?" Anko closed her eyes and said, "Do you know my middle name?" Naruto shook his head no. Anko said, "It's Sarah. Nobody knows it except you now. Not even Orochimaru. When you send me the flowers and the locket, call me Sarahime. Nobody has called me that since I was 5 when my parents died. Don't reveal who you really are to me until you're this age Aegean though, so I will take you serious. You can tell me about yourself in letters and stuff, but don't tell your age and treat me special. Also put a code word that only you and I will know in case someone were to get the letters instead of me or something." Naruto started to cough a little blood now as the poison was finishing what it was to do. Anko looked at him sadly with a tear in her eye and said, "One more thing, Gaki. Explain to me in your letters the truth of who you are, but not enough for me to figure out, and tell me about how you are the last of your clan, but make sure I know you are not an Uchiha. Also tell me about Kurenai, and if you get the sand girl also, so I don't think you're cheating. Tell Kurenai also so we can both get used to each other. And I want you to know I do like you. I have ever since our fight back a few years ago, even though I did not know who you were." Naruto smiled at her and felt his eyes slowly closing. The last thing he felt before he died was a few tears hit his cheek and a soft kiss on his lips. Naruto blinked as he opened his eyes, looking at a roof that he truly hated, and said, "This time I am doing it for myself. Not for the village, not for the old man. This time I am doing it for myself, and I will also find myself." And with a new conviction he got out of bed and looked out the window and smiled a true smile and said, "Today the real Naruto Uzumaki Kazama shall be born." Naruto, after getting dressed for the day, he went and saved that same idiot who was about to be killed by a falling plant, and sighed as he made his way to the Hokage's office. Naruto ignored everyone who tried to stop his as he walked right to the door. Two ABNU who were standing at the door went to draw a weapon, and Naruto never looked at them and said, "If you value your lives, you will let me see the Hokage." As he walked past the two stunned guards who never dreamed a 5-year-old kid would say that. By the time they recovered enough to move, they fell to the ground as a pressure point was hit on each of their necks. Naruto walked into the Hokage's office, ignoring the questioning look the Hokage was giving him. Naruto walked right to the picture of the Yondaime and bit his thumb and smeared blood on it, shocking the third Hokage. He reached in, pulled out a scroll, tossing it to the third, and said, "Long story short. I know who I really am, and I know why you did what you did. I respect you for that, old man, but I am tired of being the village's plague. I got things to do and you can do what you want. I don't want it known who my father is yet, so don't tell anyone. My name is Naruto Uzumaki Kazama. I don't really care if most of this village thinks I am Kyuubi or not, but I will be taking my family name when I am ready. I will be around sometime. Don't be surprised if you can't find me or I go missing for a week or two. I will be back. By the way, use Kujbunshians to do your paperwork." And he turned to walk out. The third screamed, "Wait." After getting over the shock of little 5-year-old Naruto come in and tell he knew the secret that only he knew, and opening a safe that he did not know about, but Naruto kept on walking, he hanged into Asuma and went to the ally to meet Kurenai Aegean. Meanwhile, back inside the Hokage tower, the third opened the scroll Naruto tossed him, and it did in fact state Naruto was Arashi's son, but what surprised him is when he saw Arashi's true mother was listed. He sighed, not knowing what to do. He quickly called for ABNU to get some people for him. When Kurenai went to kiss, Asuma kissed her back more passionately than ever and pressed the pressure point on her neck to send her into pleasure. She ed at this, and Naruto broke the kiss and said, "Senseiheim. I am not Asuma. This is a henge. I won't tell you who I really am yet, because you will be surprised when you find out who I am. I will tell you this. I am younger than you, but to me age is meaningless. I have admired you from a distance, but not because of your beauty, but for your compassion and caring nature. When the time comes, I will reveal the real me. Until then, goodbye, Senseiheim." And he flamed Shushin away, leaving a shocked Kurenai. Naruto appeared inside the forest of death, and having already activated his bloodline, he began rebuilding his home. Having done it before and knowing what to do, he was able to finish most of it within a few hours. His new home was basically a 2-story house, but did not have any windows or inside walls. It was just a big house with 2 floors and the outside walls and roof. The finer things like furniture, electric, water, sewer, among other thing would take time, but for now the basic house was built. It took most of his chakra to do this. His demon chakra helped, but he would have to begin retraining his body. He sighed as he ate the fish he had a clone catch and cook. Naruto walked into his new home and said, "This is going to be fun." and opened a dimensional portal and pulled a scroll out of it and unsealed a bed. He then got out some paintbrush and ink and got to work on some seal. After he was done, he laid down on the bed and said, "Thank God Kyubi taught me how to put stuff in dimensional pockets. No matter when I am in time, I can get stuff in or out of it. It helps not having to rebuy stuff. Oh well, this is going to be a fun week." And went to bed not even concerned that the third Hokage had 10 of his most trusted people out looking for Naruto. Naruto woke early the next day. Quickly getting ready for the day, he went and wrote out a scroll and sealed it and left Shushin back to the Hokage tower, shocking many of the ninja who were there to get their mission. Naruto walked up to the mission door office and said, "I request a mission." The third said, "Naruto, you're not a ninja, so you can't ask for a mission. Also, I would like to talk to you in private." Naruto said, "You misunderstand me, Hokage-sama. I do not want a mission. I wish to commission a mission." The Hokage blinked and said, "And what would that mission be?" Naruto said, "I wish to pay for 2 S-class missions. I also request for the mission to be carried out by the same person." The Hokage said, "S-class mission, you say? You know they are expensive, Naruto. I also would like to know what the missions are." Everyone in the room was listening in, and Naruto said, "They are both delivery missions. One is to Jiraiya of the Sannin and the other is to the Kazekage of Suna. The third scroll here is for Kakashi alone to read." The third blinked and said, "Would you mind explaining to me why you want that?" Naruto said, "All you need to know is that I want both missions carried out by Hatake Kakashi, and that if either of my scrolls are open besides the intended person, the repercussions will be severe. Also, he must wait until he receives an answer to both scrolls. As for the pay here," throwing a scroll on the table, "there is $2 million in that scroll. Now, do you accept my missions, or do I take my money and mission elsewhere?" Naruto said, ignoring the looks everyone was giving him. The Hokage was shocked and saw everyone of the ninja in the mission room looking at him to see what he was going to do. The third said, "Very well. I will accept your mission. I still wish to." He was cut off by Naruto leaf shushing away, shocking everyone. Aegean. Naruto appeared back at his home and began the task of rebuilding his home. The Hokage sighed and looked in the scroll and indeed did find the amount Naruto said. A Chunin said, "Hokage-sama. What was that all about, and how did that boy use a shushin that only Chunin or higher know?" The Hokage looked up and said, "Mizuki, I don't have to answer your questions now. I have things to do, so get back in line to wait for your mission." Mizuki nodded and got back in line, filling this for later. The Hokage looked at the 2 scrolls Naruto had given him and the mission money, trying to figure out what was going on. He continued handing out missions, and around noon he finally got to the last scroll. He decided he would not send them out until he got answers. The next day Naruto got ready for the day and brought out more scrolls with stuff he has for his home. He then created some kajbunshions to work on the house, and he hanged into his disguise of Arashi and started getting things he needed for his home. Food, bathroom supplies, things of that nature. Stuff you don't really want to stock up on. As he was walking through the village, he saw a group of villagers gathered outside his old apartment. Carefully he slowly walked closer to listen to what the group was there for. "You mean the demon has not been here today? Where could he be? I heard he attacked the Hokage. I heard he used his demon power to attack some ABNU yesterday. I say we find and kill him." Naruto said, "Pardon me, friends. If you're talking about the blonde with whiskers, I saw him sneaking into the women's side of the hot springs on the west side of town now." The group, which was all men, screamed, "Let's get the demon," and charged for the hot spring. Naruto turned and saw a woman he was hoping to see standing on the corner of the street looking at him and said, "You know, I should have you taken to the Hokage for doing that to the Gaki. The kid has a hard enough life without making it tougher." Naruto said, "I would agree if I did not just set those idiots up to get the shit beat out of them." I happen to know that most of the Inazakas visit the hot springs today and they don't like perverts. Also, the kid does not live here anymore. He has a new home hidden away from most of the village. The woman said, if what you say is true, then I like your style, Gaki. By the way, I know you don't really look like that. I can tell it's an advance henge. Also, how do you know where the kid is now? The Hokage was looking for him yesterday and no one could find him. Naruto nodded and leaned it against the wall and said, I know where he is, but I respect his privacy. You're right. This is an advance henge that can't be dispelled by anyone but me, and even a Sharingan can't see through it. I have my reason for doing this, but you don't need to worry about that. I will tell you, I am not an enemy of the leaf. Anko walked over to him and said, you know I have to take you in since you're not allowed to be in a henge in this village without permission from the Hokage, and since I don't know who you are, Gaki, I can't trust your words. Naruto nodded and said, I understand, but I won't be going this time. Take care, Sarahime. And he flamed Shushin away, leaving a very shocked Anko. Naruto arrived at his home and saw his Kage Shins have been making great progress on his home. He sighed and sat down and said, I am glad chakra control is based on how smart you are. If I did not have such good control from everything, I would never be able to henge and Shushin like this. Even Kage in my bloodline are draining. I need to get my reserve back up quickly. He looked at the stuff he had bought and the stuff still needing to be put in place or built. The kitchen was nearly ready. The bathroom was done and all seals for both rooms were finished. The seals to provide electricity and water to the house had been done, so basic necessities were done. The next day Naruto went into town disguised as Arashi Ajian and walked into the Yamanko flower shop. A man with blonde hair Naruto recognized as Ino's dad said, Welcome to the Yamanko flower shop. How can I help you today? Naruto said, I would like to have some flowers ordered and delivered. The man nodded and said, Can I ask why you're in a henge? Naruto said, It's because the ladies that I want to send the flowers to do not know it is me that is sending them, and I want to get both their attentions before I reveal who I really am. Inoichi said, I understand, but you know the Hokage has already sent word to all Junins in the village to capture you, right? Naruto said, I figured he would, considering I display skills no one in the village has seen before. I am not going to cause any trouble, but I would like to order my flowers before we get to official business. Inoichi said, You know I can't do that. Naruto sighed and said, If I can give you some proof I am a member of the Leaf Village, would you let me get my flowers and leave saying I escaped? Inoichi said, Why would I do that? Naruto walked over to a set of flowers and said, Growth. And the flowers grew dramatically. Naruto turned and said, I am the great-great-grandson of the Shodaime Hokage. I am also the last of my clan that can carry on my family line. I don't want the people of this village to know who I am because the village has lost my respect. I won't reveal who I really am until my grandmother and grandfather arrive. I am not hostile to the village because if I were, the village would not be standing. Catch. And he threw a scroll flame Shushin away, leaving a shocked Inoichi who thought it was an attack but instead was a scroll. He looked around the shop and opened the scroll and was surprised by what was inside. It was an order for white roses and jasmines, but what surprised him even more was the note to the Hokage and who the flowers were for, as well as the payment. He quickly closed the shop and went to the Hokage's office. When he got there, he saw the third was at his desk and said, Pardon the interruption, Hokage-sama. The third looked up and said, What is it, Inoichi? Inoichi said, The gentleman you asked everyone to be on the lookout for came to my shop a little while ago. The third nodded and Inoichi said, He wanted some flowers ordered and all, and he showed and told me something before escaping I think you should know. He claims he is the great-great-grandson of the Shodaime Hokage, and from the display of manipulating plants I say it's a good chance. He also said he is not a threat to the village but said that we have lost his respect. He said he won't reveal who he is until his grandfather and grandmother arrive. The third looked at the scrolls on his desk and said, I see. I believe I know who he is now. If he is who I think he is, then I know why he is in Henge. Did he say anything else? Inoichi said. He said he was not hostile to the village because if he was, it would not be standing. He said he was the last one who could carry on his family line. The third closed his eyes and said, Who were the flowers for? Inoichi said, Actually, that surprised me the most. Kurenai and Anko. He said he was in Henge because he was not ready to reveal who he was yet to either of them. The third coughed and sat up at his desk and said, Thank you, Inoichi. Go ahead and fill the orders if he paid in any further orders. Don't worry about stopping him for now. If I am correct who he is, then I believe what he said is true. Also, don't tell anyone about him being the first descendant. Inoichi nodded and left, and the third sighed before sending a message for Kakashi. An hour later, Kakashi arrived at the Hokage office and said, You asked to see me, Hokage-sama. The third nodded and said, I have a mission for you. Kakashi said, Does this have anything to do with Naruto? The third said, Yes. I assume you heard he requested a mission earlier this week. Kakashi nodded behind his ABNU mask and said, I don't know how he knows me though. The third said, Neither do I, but he left a scroll for you to read. And he handed it to Kakashi. Kakashi opened it and began to read, and after a few moments said, You have some explaining to do, dropping all pretenses of respect. The third blinked and said, Let me guess. He told you who he really is. Kakashi said, Among other things. Why did you not tell me? The third said, I did it for his best interest. Kakashi slammed his fist into the table and said, His best interest, bullshit. I have seen what he has been through, and his best interest was thrown to the side the moment you changed his name. The third sighed and said, I admit I made some mistakes in dealing with him. I did the only thing I could think of to save his life. Kakashi sighed and said, Give me the scrolls, I will take the missions. The third said, What exactly are they, Kakashi? Kakashi sighed and said, I don't know. It just told me who he is and that he needs those scrolls delivered and wait for a response to both. He said I would be the only one Jiraiya would halfway listen to, and he does not want too many people to know who he is yet. He also said I won't be able to find him because he has built a home somewhere only one person besides himself goes. The third sighed and said, I wish he would tell me what's going on. Kakashi blinked and said, You did not tell him who he was, did you? The third said, He walked into my office this week after knocking out my 2 guards and opened a safe I knew nothing about that I assume his father installed, and then said he knew who he was and knew why I did what I did, but said he was not going to be this village's plague anymore, and walked out after giving me a scroll from his father. I don't know how he found out because I thought I was the only one who knew. Kakashi said, Perhaps he will tell you if you see him. I got some missions I need to do so I can get back and talk to him. The third nodded and said, You don't happen to know if he has ever met Anko or Kurenai before, do you? Kakashi looked confused and said, No, why? The third said, Oh, nothing. I just was wondering because someone ordered some flowers for both of them and I thought it might have been him. I guess I have been reading too many of Jiraiya's books. Kakashi nodded and said, I should be back in a month. Naruto gave me a list of places to look for Jiraiya. I wonder how he knows him. The third said, He doesn't as far as I know. Perhaps his dad left instructions for him to meet Jiraiya or something. Kakashi nodded and left, leaving a confused Hokage. Kurenai had just arrived at a dango stand with her friend Anko when Inoichi walks up and said, Well, I don't know how, but you both seem to have attracted an admirer of sorts. Both Kurenai and Anko looked up and said, Huh. Inoichi pulls out 2 different flower arrangements and handed them to the ladies. Anko said, I wonder what some gaki is trying to pull, as she took the flowers and sat them on the table acting like she did not care, but took the scroll and began to read. Kurenai also took her flowers but smelled them and then took the scroll attached and read it and blushed as she read it. Inoichi said, "So what's he say?" Kurenai looked up from the scroll and said, "You actually met him. What does he look like?" Anko seemed to be listening in and Inoichi said, "Truthfully I don't know. He matches the description Anko gave for the guy in the henge. He still had it on and managed to escape before I could take him in." Anko growled and said, "I am going to kill the Gaki." Kurenai said, "What does he say to you?" Anko said, "He just tried to tell me he want to become something special in his life and he is the heir to a forgotten clan and he has been watching me for a while and wants to show his feelings for me. He also says that he has also gotten to like you and one other from another village he is hoping to get to know and perhaps have a relationship with. Sound like a pervert to me." Kurenai said, "You think it might be Kakashi? He is a pervert." Inoichi said, "I can guarantee it's not Kakashi." Both women looked at him and said, "How can you be sure?" Inoichi looked around and said, "Simple, Kakashi can't control plants." Both women blinked and said, "Huh." Inoichi said, "He claimed he is related to the first Hokage and the third said he thinks he knows who he is but won't tell me who, but you did not hear that from me." Both women nodded and Inoichi said, "Well, I got to get back to my shop. I will be glad when Ino is old enough so I don't have to close shop." After he left, Kurenai looked at Anko and said, "What do you think?" Anko said, "Whoever he is has a date with my snakes." Kurenai snorted and said, "I can't believe I did not recognize he had a henge on when he looked like Asuma." Anko said, "You think it might be him?" Kurenai said, "Not if what Inoichi said is true. Do you think he is a descendant of the first?" Anko said, "I don't know but I have another question on my mind." Kurenai said, "And that would be?" Anko said, "He called me something nobody but my parents have ever called me. I want to know how he found out." Kurenai nodded and said, "What do you think of the flowers?" "Somehow he knew my favorites." Anko said, "I don't like flowers so I don't have a preference," looking around lying. Kurenai said, "So if he ask you out you going to go?" Anko said, "Please. Gaki would have to do better than a few weeds to impress me." Kurenai said, "I might, just to find out why he would flirt so openly like this." Anko sighed and said, "I got to go. Ibiki said he wants me to work on some new intimidation stuff." Kurenai nodded and said, "Take care and if you hear from him let me know." Anko nodded and said, "If Gaki's smart he would avoid me unless he wants to die," and left. Kurenai did also walking by a man with blonde hair and black eyes reading a book on her way out. The owner walked over and the man said, "Hi buddy. I heard from a friend of mine that this is the best dango shop in all of Konoha." The owner said, "Whoever your friend is must have great taste as it's true." The blonde said, "Name's Arashi and I am a businessman of sorts. I travel a lot and have some unique taste and I was wondering if you might be interested in a sort of business deal." The owner said, "Not really but I will listen since no one else is here right now. By the way, the name is Leo." Arashi smiled and said, "Nice to meet you Leo and I think you might like my offer. I don't really want to do anything to change your restaurant except pay in advance for a few items to be in stock so when I am in town I can have it. My offer is 100,000 a year if you would just carry 6 items. 3 different fruit and 3 wines that's it. I like to relax with dango fruit and wine but it hard to find these items in villages this far away from Cloud." Leo said, "Well we don't really have trade routes with Cloud so I don't think it's possible even though you have a great deal." Arashi said, "That's not a problem. Even though the wine I want is common in Cloud it is not made there. In fact I have a supplier who can deliver them. I just want to make a contact here to supply it since I am planning on spending a lot more time in the Leaf Village." Leo looked at him and said, "Well that doesn't sound too bad but the 100,000 a year you cost me if I have to store the items for any period of time." Arashi said, I understand, perhaps I can make it better for you. Every year for 4 years you go with keeping the item in stock. I will give you a bonus at the end of the 4th year of 200,000 for any inconvenience. Leo seemed to be in thought and said, deal. How long would it take to set up the supply line? Arashi said, I should have it set up within 2 months. Leo nodded and said, sounds good, partner. Arashi said, partner. Well, if you insist. Leo said, yeep. I was actually in a little financial problem since my regular suppliers sold out last month. Arashi nodded and said, well, it's getting late. I will draw up the contract and bring it by later this week. Good night. And he got up and finished his drink, walking off. After he made it outside, he walked toward a side street and then down an alley and stopped and said, your detection skills are getting better, Senseiheim. A genjutsu dropped, revealing Kurenai at the end of the alley and said, yours are also good. So tell me, when will I actually get to see the real you? Arashi said, someday, but I want to prove to you and Anko I am not just some pervert or stalker. As far as what I was doing back there was a coincidence that you were there. Isn't that right, Sarahime? Turning his head slightly to Anko at the other end of the alley. Anko said, so Gaki. What do you plan to do? Arashi changed henge to brown hair and blue eyes and said, well, to answer that, I have figured out a few things and I plan to do them to impress you both. I can't wait for you to meet the real me, but for now I will just leave a parting gift. Pulls something out of his pocket and sets it on the ground and disappears in a swirl of flames. Anko looked at Kurenai and said, how does he do that? Kurenai said, I don't know. Walks over and picks up what he left. Anko walks over and gasps. Kurenai looked at Anko and sees her slowly reaching for the item. As she touches it, a single tear escapes her eyes. Kurenai asks, are you okay, Anko? Anko just nods and said, my mother's locket. Orochimaru threw it into a chasm on the other side of town. Even with all my skills now I could not get to the bottom to get it, as she holds the locket close to her heart. Kurenai smiles a small smile as Anko opens it and shows the picture of Anko as a little girl with her parent. They both stand there in silence for a few minutes and Anko whispers, thank you, before they part for the evening. On a rooftop a little ways away from the two, Arashi says, you're welcome, and flames shushin home. 4 days later at Suna, one Hatake Kakashi was standing in front of the cage in his ABNU uniform and said, thank you for see me, Kazekage-sama. The cage said, of course, ABNU. So what do I owe the pleasure of your visit? Has something happened that the Hokage needs to draw to my attention? Kakashi said, honestly, I don't know. I was given a mission to deliver a scroll to you and wait for a response, as he holds out a scroll. The cage looked at it and said, very well. And he takes the scroll, opening it and begins reading it. After a few moments he puts the scroll down and looked at it a few minutes and said, I will arrive at that time to allow a meeting. Correspondence will be allowed and I accept the gift he has given. I will also not mention it to anyone besides my family. Tell him that I agree to his stipulations. Kakashi nodded and said, I will tell him when I see him. Kakashi started to leave and the cage said, you don't know what delivered to you. Kakashi stopped and turned and said, no, Kazekage-sama. The cage said, tell me, ABNU. Do you know this Kazama? Kakashi stiffened and said, a little, sir. My duties keep me away from the village mostly. The cage nodded and said, do you know if he is a good person? Kakashi blinked behind his mask and said, I believe so. The cage said, good. Dismiss and safe journey. Kakashi nodded and left, heading for his next destination. Back in Konoha the next day, Anko was walking through the forest of death holding the locket she received earlier this week when she felt some chakra coming from inside the forest. Deciding to investigate, she quickly used her stealth to travel deep into the forest to the side farthest from the village but also the most dangerous. She followed the chakra source for about half an hour, and when she arrived at an area she felt the source from, she was shocked because of the sight that greeted her. Over 500 cage bun shins were waterwalking and running up and down trees. She recognized the cage bun shins as the Kyuubi kid. Suddenly she saw something fall into the clearing and destroy a couple of clones that were balancing on kuniyas. She looked up and nearly had a heart attack. Sitting in the trees was a huge mansion. She made sure she was concealed and held her chakra as low as possible as she looked around. She watched and soon saw one of the clones that was different. She looked at it and watched as 25 new Kajbunshians appeared around that one. She then watched as the 25 clones changed into different people and take up different fighting stances. She saw one of herself in the group and became confused as she watched herself get into the serpent stance. The one she noticed was different before got into a fighting stance she did not recognize, and then the 25 clones that were people she knew or did not know began to fight. The battle was deadly. The techniques she saw them use was something she never would have expected. The one of Asuma used trench knives and even had a wind affinity. The one of Kakashi surprised her the most as it used Chidori. Kurenai used the Treeband of Death. Hieti used the Crescent Moon style of sword fighting. Her clone used the Hidden Snake Hand. She watched the battle as each and every move was countered by the Naruto she assumed now was the real one. She then got a surprise that she would never have dreamed. The kid used the fourth prized jutsu Rasengan and Haraishin. Even though she had never actually seen them, she had read enough about them to know that's what they were. She watched as some of the weaker fighters were taken out. The guy clone and a mini version of him she could have sworn opened the gates. The kid was receiving wounds but kept on fighting. A clone of Itachi said something that made Anko puzzled. I will kill you Kyuubi just like I killed my clan. Soon the 25 clones that had started were down to 2. Anko looked at the 2 and were surprised by who they were. What happened next made her blood run cold. The 2 clones that was standing there were Tsunade and Jiraiya. Another clone appeared and this time Orochimaru stood there. She listened as his clone began to speak. Kukukukik Naruto-kun. I see you are still too weak to kill me. How can you hope to protect the women you love from me? Naruto looked at him and his eyes changed red and said, I will kill you Orochimaru. I will do it for all the people's lives you have ruined and are planning on ruin. But most of all I will stop you for Sarahime. And Naruto suddenly jumped onto a tree branch and grabbed the tree branch, causing it to attack Orochimaru. Anko, who saw all of this, was frozen in place. She then heard the other 2 Sannin clones speak. Naruto, why do you fight for a village that curses the day you were born? Tsunade said. Jiraiya said, come on kid. Do you really think with everything you do you will ever find happiness in this village? Naruto said, shut up grandfather. I heard it from you before. And you grandmother. First putting dad up for adoption just to keep from upsetting the Hokage. Please, you claim it was for his protection but I know the truth. Then never telling him who you were. I lived most of my lives alone and that pain is impossible to understand. The loneliness of not knowing if you even had a family and then find out one is out writing books and the other gambles and drinks. I swear when I restore my clan I will not only love my wives but my children. And he charged all 3 Sannins, attacking each as they used their individual skills. Anko's breath was caught in her throat as she watched him stand toe to toe with the Sannins. She gasped when she saw her former master use a ceiling on his stomach. What happened next would forever be in her memory. Naruto slowly stood up and looked at Orochimaru and said, too late Orochimaru. You can't seal what's not there. Kyuubi's been dead for a long time now. Now join him. And Naruto flamed Shushin around the battlefield attacking from different areas. Sadly all of the Sannins still stood strong. Finally Naruto fell to the ground face first. He rolled himself over but just laid there and passed out. Anko was about to jump down but something she heard earlier made her stop. But most of all I will stop you for Sarahime. She then thought of the flame shushin attacks he used in the controlling the trees. This Gaki was the one who'd been flirting with her and Kurenai. She started to get angry at that until she heard him still on the ground speak. I am trying, Sarahime. You told me you liked white roses and I already got your locket for you. I will get strong enough to protect you from him. At least I have not screwed this life yet. I hope everything works out. I am getting tired of repeating lives. You still look beautiful to me. Senseiheim also. I know the old man is already suspicious of me, but I don't care. He did not trust me before, so why should he trust me now? You always have such good advice, Sarahime. First you tell me to learn about all the women I would like to live my life with. I tried that and found 3 goddesses that I would be honored to grow old with. There's you and Senseiheim, and then there's Tamarihime. It's being this young Aegean. I have the body of an almost 6-year-old but the mind of someone many years older. I gave up a long time ago keeping track. Well, I guess I better get started, Aegean. I will be glad to be a genin Aegean so I can finally show you my true self. I hope you're safe and happy, my Heims. And he got up and started to walk toward a tree to get back to his house, only to pass out and all of his clones disappear. Anko stood in place where she was as she listened to him. She was thinking, Kyuubi's dead. Grandfather, grandmother, repeating lives. What the hell is going on? Anko looked around and saw Naruto was still passed out and jumped out of her hitting spot and walked over, picking the kid up, and then tree climbing up to the mansion and walked inside and nearly dropped Naruto right then and there. The sight that greeted her was amazing. She looked around and saw a couch and put Naruto down on it. She then started to look around. She saw pictures of herself older than she is now with different people. She saw a picture of Tsunade and Jiraiya with some kid who looked like Naruto, and after seeing the whiskers she was sure was him. She saw the same thing with Kurenai with what looked like a genin team. She soon found a similar picture of Naruto in an orange jumpsuit with a pink-haired girl and what looked like an Uchiha and Kakashi. Anko said, "Do you ever show your face, Kakashi, and what the hell is with the orange jumpsuit? It practically screams kill me." A voice from the couch said, "No, he doesn't, and the jumpsuit is all the stores would allow me to buy, Anko. They do after all want the Kyuubi brat to die." Anko turned and saw Naruto sitting up slowly. He turned to her looking down and said, "So how much did you see?" Anko looked at him and said, "Everything from the Battle Royal to the Sanenfest, and I heard you afterwards." Naruto sighed and turned slowly and said, "I guess you got questions and want answers." Anko said, "You can say that, but I am not the only one." Naruto nodded and said, "Do you think you can find this place, Aegean?" Anko said, "Yeah, why?" Naruto sighed and said, "Tonight 7 o'clock. Bring Kurenai and the Hokage. Don't tell them what it's about, but make sure you're not followed. I will make dinner and answer everything." Anko said, "Why should I believe you, Gaki?" Naruto said, "I will remove your curse seal." Anko was stunned and Naruto slowly got up and winced as he was still hurt from the spar and walked over to her and said, "Also, I always keep my promises. Even when they kill me." Anko seemed to think it over and said, "All right, Gaki. I will trust you for now." And she disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Naruto sighed and said, "Damn it. I was not ready for this," and began preparing for tonight. Anko arrived back inside the village and went to the Hokage office. When she arrived, she saw the Hokage sitting in his chair, but a man she recognized as Uchiha Itachi was standing there. Anko knocked and Itachi turned and said, "Hello, Anko. How are you today?" Anko said, "Fine." A flash of what the Itachi clone said made her nervous a little. If Naruto really did know the future as she suspected, then Itachi would kill the Uchiha clan. She filed that away for later. The Hokage said, "Itachi, I want you to see if you can find Naruto. You have the best chance with your tracking abilities." Anko said, "Actually, sir, that's what I came here to tell you. I saw him today and he wants to talk to you later today." The third said, really, and where did you see him? Anko remembered the Genin team picture of Naruto and saw the memorial stone, so she said, I saw him on a training ground near the memorial stone and he asked me to relay the message. The third nodded and said, never mind Itachi. Thank you anyways. Itachi nodded and said, of course Hokage-sama. And he left in a leaf shushin. Anko sighed and the third said, so why did you lie? Anko said, I really did meet him but not where I said. I saw and heard some things today that has me questioning Itachi loyalty. That's why I lied. Naruto said he wanted you, me and Kurenai at his mansion tonight at 7. The third blinked and said, mansion. What mansion? Anko said, he built a mansion inside the forest of death. The third chuckled and said, no wonder we could not find him. Anko nodded and said, there is something else. He said Kyuubi's dead and the seal's gone. The third paled and coughed at this and said, anything else? Anko said, I think the rest should wait until tonight. I would tell your family you won't be home till late because I think this is going to be long night. The third nodded and said, why are you so open about this, Anko? You hardly trust anyone and the fact you are basically putting all your faith in Naruto is something I have never seen before. Anko thought for a moment and said, I seen that kid do something even I could not do. The third said, and that is? Anko said, you will have to see for yourself. The third said, right. I will meet you at the tower at the Forest of Death at 6:30. Anko turned to leave and stopped and said, I have a personal request, Hokage-sama. The third looked at her and motioned for her to continue. Anko said, don't tell anyone about where we are meeting or have anyone follow us. The kid seems like he's been betrayed more times than I have and his trust is only so far. The third sighed and said, I understand. Finding out what he did will do that. Anko nodded and left to find Kurenai. Anko found Kurenai at the hot springs. When she got there she decided to relax also. After getting undressed she went into the water and sat by Kurenai. Kurenai said, I thought you would be training today. Anko said, I was until I met our mutual friend today. Kurenai blinked and said, really? Did you find out anything? Hana Inazaka a Genin said, really Kurenai and Anko? You both have a guy you both like. Who is he? Kurenai said, it's not like that. This guy is playing the whole mysterious person thing and has been flirting with both of us. Anko said, he wants to meet us tonight at 7. The two other women besides Hana and the two Heims looked at them and Hana said, really, so where does he plan to meet you? Anko said, I found his home and he is going to prepare dinner for us and tell us everything we want to know. Kurenai looked at Anko and said, exactly how did you find him, Anko? Anko said, I found him when he was destroying a training grounds. The Gaki could probably beat most of the village if he really wanted to. Kurenai sighed and said, learn anything new about him. Anko smirked and said, I saw what he really looks like. Kurenai sat straight up, shocking everyone, and said, tell me. Anko shook her head no and said, I will tell you this. Don't let your first impression fool you. Kurenai sighed and said, I hate your cryptic games. Anko said, meet me at my place at 6:15. Kurenai said, but you said he wanted to see us at 7 inches. Anko said, you will find out why later. And got up to leave. Hana looked at Anko and said, are you going to tell us anything else? Anko placed her hand on the locket and said, nope, and turned to leave. Kurenai sighed and Hana said, details. Kurenai cursed Anko and said, all I really can tell you is that he says he has admired us both for some time and that he is a good kisser. Hana said, and how do you know that? Kurenai blushed and said, I saw who I thought was Asuma walk into an ally and I went to flirt like we sometimes do. Turned out it was this mysterious guy in an advance henge that can't be dispelled. Trust me, I tried. He has shown up in 3 different discourses and has sent us flowers and recovered that locket Anko said Orochimaru threw into that ravine near here. Hana said. Sounds like he is going all out to impress you both. Kurenai said. Seems like it though. I wonder why he really is hiding who he is. Hana said. Perhaps it's someone who was too shy to tell you. Kurenai said. Maybe. As she relaxed thinking about later. Later that evening at 6:30 Anko and Kurenai arrived at the tower in the Forest of Death and Kurenai said, What are we doing here Anko? Anko said, We are meeting his other guest. Kurenai said, Who? The third walked up from behind them and said, That would be me. Kurenai said, Hokage-sama. Surprised. He smiled at her and said, Shall we Anko? Anko nodded and began leading them to Naruto's home. When the three arrived at the mansion the sun was just setting and they could still see the place. Kurenai and the third were in awe by the place and Anko was a little but not as much as originally. The mansion was 2 stories tall and could probably hold 50 people comfortably. After they climbed the tree they walked to the front door and it opened and a man in a butler suit was standing there. The third chuckled at this and said, That has got to be the second best way to use Kagebunshians I have ever seen. The butler said, Of course Hokage-sama. Paperwork is the best way. The third said, Indeed, and thanks for the tip. Now might I inquire as to where our host is? The butler said, He will be down in moments and dinner will be ready shortly. He left orders to see if you needed any drinks and said to make yourself at home. The third nodded and Anko said, I think before he gets here you should look at his pictures in the living room. Might make what he says more believable. Kurenai and the third shot her a confused look and followed her into the living room. Looking around raised several questions for both the third and Kurenai. The butler returned a few minutes later and said, Dinner is served and your host is waiting on you. They all nodded and followed the clone into a dining room and 2 more butlers were there and pulled out the chairs for Anko and Kurenai. A voice from behind them said, I am glad you arrived safely and I know you 3 have many questions. I promise you I won't lie about anything. And the 15-year-old version of Naruto arrived wearing a pair of black pants and a white dress shirt. The third looked at him and said, Why are you still in a henge Naruto? Naruto said, I will explain that but I would like to tell you my story. Kurenai said, Naruto. As in Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto sighed and said, Yes and no Senseiheim. Kurenai said, What do you mean? Naruto said, My real name is Naruto Kazama and I am the son of Arashi Kazama the Yondaime Hokage. I am also the grandson of Tsunade and Jiraiya of the Sanins. I may look like I am only 6 years old but I am a lot older than that. The third said, What do you mean Naruto? Naruto took a sip of wine and said, When I was dying from a Chidori from my teammate Sasuke Uchiha after he defected from the village to go to Orochimaru the Shinigami came and was going to take me to the other side. Kyuubi would have been released because we had not merged enough to drag his soul to the other side. I was 13 at the time. Kyuubi made a deal with the Shinigami and he accepted it. I would be given one of the heavenly powers of the Phoenix and allowed to go back to the age of 5 and try to correct the mistakes that were made in my life by myself and others. Kyuubi gave me all of his power also as part of the deal. Each time I go back I keep all the knowledge I gain and I have tried many things to fix the mistakes. Everyone was stunned by this and the third said, I find it hard to believe Naruto and also the fact of what you said about Kyuubi also is hard to believe. Naruto raised his shirt and channeled chakra and said, You and I both know old man that the Kyuubi seal would always show up even through a henge and as you can see I don't have it. It does not matter if you believe me or not. It's the truth. Anyways I will answer some question but certain things have to happen that can't be changed or all my knowledge is basically useless. Kurenai said, What do you mean? Naruto sighed and said, A tragedy will befall Konoha within a month and I could tell you who will do it and why but it has to happen. I have tried every way to stop it but it always either results in even more deaths or the entire city going into a civil war. Anyways, Sarahime, show me your curse seal. Anko nodded and pulled her shirt to the side a little and the third said, What are you going to do, Naruto? Naruto walked behind her and said, removing it, and placed his hand over her curse seal and started to channel demon chakra into it, and Anko screamed out in pain, but the pain soon was replaced with pleasure as Naruto then hit the same pressure point he hit on Kurenai and made Anko have pleasure like never imagined, and the seal burned away, only leaving a scar. Naruto walked over and sat down and said, I am sorry for tricking you, Senseiheim and Sarahime, but if you would have known I was a kid, you would have ignored me flat out on principle, and I wanted to try and show you both I do care about you. The third said, what was the 2 scrolls Kakashi went to deliver? Naruto snickered and said, one was to try and work things out with the third person I wrote to the lovely ladies here about as a possible relationship with. I sent a potential political marriage and all, but I set it up where it's all her choice. The third nodded and said, do I need to worry about anything concerning this? Naruto said, you will receive scrolls from Suna that will need to be sent to me. Other than that, not until my age group's Chunin exams. The third said, and the other one? Naruto smiled and said, family reunion. Kurenai said, what do you mean? Naruto said, I want him to come train me and we are going to look for Tsunade. I will be back in time for my age group graduation. The third said,